Okay, so this video is going to be what I'm going to term my StephAdemia collection. For those of you who don't know, I got my associates, then my bachelor's, and then my master's. So a lot of me has to do with the things that I've studied and wrote papers on. So I actually decided to start with my first paper from grad school. It was a new media class, and it was about comic books, digital literature, and gaming. So it was an interesting class to take, especially for my first class in a master's. I was like, oh, this is cool, I get to study comic books. And then later in reading one of the books, I was like, I fucking have no idea what I'm learning. Like, I am totally new to this. Not about the comic books, but about the digital literature portion. It was probably one of the worst books I ever read, and even the professor was like, oh yeah, this is definitely for, advanced people, nobody who's a novice, but, this is the book I chose. And I'm like, awesome. Good decision. So we had to find, a conference to possibly present at and kind of do a paper to do with something in there. So I chose the conference New Directions in Comic Studies, which was hosted by Birkbeck, University of London. Obviously, I did not go there. I'm poor. So the abstract that I typed up was, there is a well-known long-standing battle within society today that quite often transforms friends to foes with two key phrases. The book was better, or the movie was better. However, Chuck Palahniuk, author of the novel Fight Club, is giving his fans another stand to take. The comic was better. Now, mind you, I've heard him say his name before, and I say it different and probably wrong, but this is what I'm going with. So sorry. Palahniuk's 1996 novel became a cult classic when director David Fincher adapted it into the medium of film in 1999. Films have long awaited a sequel of more mischief, mayhem, and soap. However, few could have guessed it would reach their fingertips, issued monthly in an inked-up form. Hey, my Fight Club novel has new tattoos. Cool. Palahniuk decided to collaborate with illustrator Cameron Stewart and took the Fight Club story to a new medium, yet again introducing Tyler Durden, Marla Singer, and as we knew him, the narrator, into the world of comic books. Those unfamiliar with comics but fans of Fight Club will be led down the rabbit hole of panels, gutters, word balloons, bleeds, and will be subject to learning a whole new way of experiencing the beloved characters. This paper will look further into Palahniuk's decision in taking Fight Club to yet another medium, this time in unfamiliar territory, the construction of the collaboration between writer and illustrator, and the specific stylistic choices used in this medium compared to the preceding novel and film, giving the Fight Club story a whole new scar to educate its followers in. The specific stylistic choices will be examined are the use of breaking the fourth wall, realistic versus iconic cartoony, received information paired with perceived information, and how pictures paired with the text affect a reader differently than a work with text only, the novel. So this paper looks like I wrote September 21st, 2015. God, that seems like forever ago now. And I titled my paper, Breaking the First Two Rules of Fight Club, a look inside the detailed collaboration of Fight Club 2, the comic. How much can you know about yourself if you've never read a comic? This is a question Fight Club fans could be asking themselves as they flip through the much-awaited sequel to their beloved cult classic novel, once adapted film, and now transformed into a multi-volume comic. Adapting into a comic is a little different than adapting a novel to a film. For some, they experienced the film first. For others, it was the novel. For many, it didn't matter. The chicken, novel, or the egg, film, if you're a Fight Club fan, you were a Fight Club fan. No mind was paid to medium. Palahniuk is well aware of the cult following that the novel and film versions have acquired. Not only is he aware, but he seems to be using it to play around in the new mediums, specifically with the sequel, giving it a voice of its own. Brian Bishop expressed that the medium changes coupled with Fight Club's mass following is why it continues to entice new readers. Not only has Palahniuk moved to the medium of comics for its sequel, but according to The Verge, Palahniuk expresses his hope of Fight Club being the millennials' rock opera, with mention of a musical in the works brought to life by David Fincher and Julie Taymor. Julie Taymor, by the way, did the film version of Titus Andronicus, which is just called Titus, and stars Anthony Hopkins. Didn't really like some of her stylistic choices, but in general, I absolutely loved the story and thought it went pretty well. When questioned about the 27-year gap between the original novel and now comic sequel, Palahniuk explained that everything really came together at a dinner party where one of his friends pushed a couple comic writers on him to write a comic. It was then that Palahniuk knew that the first comic he was going to write was going to be his cult classic. The major appeal of the medium to Palahniuk was that the comics would disperse over months and months, opposed to being not only readily apparent, but also so readily consumed. The hermit crab into a new medium for some would seem like a risky move, but according to a friend and cover artist for Fight Club, David Mack, Palahniuk was excited by the different challenges that were to be set before him. With Palahniuk's lack of experience in the construction of comics, he collaborated with the well-known, quote, best living sequential artist, end quote, illustrator Cameron Stewart. Palahniuk had a precise vision of the script which he gave to Stewart in its entirety, which helped Stewart to shape the comic, set its tone, and give him a good idea of how to set up the visual style of the story. For those loyal to a club you can't talk about, it was a little offsetting to visually transition from the film characters to the comic characters. And then I'll flip this around real quick so you can kind of get an idea. Let me make this screen a little smaller. I have a picture of Tyler in the comic, and then of course Brad Pitt, who played Tyler, and then a picture of the narrator, who is now called Sebastian in the comic, and Edward Norton. So those are kind of the side-by-sides. Comic Tyler on top, film Tyler bottom, and then side to side with Norton and Sebastian. Now I think it's a graphic novel as far as I know, and you can just get it all in one issue. I got it issue by issue because it came out when I was doing my research, so that was awesome. Very timely. Despite the fact that Palahniuk and Stewart were prohibited by 20th Century Fox from using any resemblances from the film for the comics, Stewart did his best in creating characters and scenes that fans could identify with. Which, an aside here, I think it's an absolute crap. I understand this whole owning the rights, blah, blah, blah. But even Kevin Smith talked about how he couldn't make certain movies or use certain things because he didn't own the rights. But he did own the rights to Jay and Silent Bob, like those two characters. So I understand wanting to pay for things and putting homages and having rights, but it really screws some fans and some creatistic abilities when you're like, nope, can't use that, nope, can't use that, nope, you gotta pay me, nope, nope, nope. Fucking get over yourselves. Just let people create and make art. And I wish that, somebody who created this, even though another company, freaking 20th Century Fox, may own the rights to the film, you still wouldn't have this without Chuck Palahniuk. So they should be his. It should all be him and what he wants to do. So whatever. I think that's all bullshit. Even with the limiting copyright issues, Stewart was still able to do many amazing things stylistically with the medium. His choice in more traditional cartoony comic book style of drawing was due to the range in density and absurdly comical moments, as well as the repetitive use of metafiction throughout the comic. The traditional style complements director David Fincher's film style of encompassing the very raw and powerful situations characters are put in and the extreme emotions Palahniuk scripts. Scott McCloud explains that while the cartoon face is abstract, its basis is upon visual data, makes the line between visible and invisible clear. Although this panel is drawn as cartoony, it offsets the absurdity of it being a very dense panel. With that said, the density is an illusion. If you don't read close enough, you'll miss the little cigarette burns, like the author being a character in the comic. Let me see. I said figure 6. So kind of the cartoony element that I'll show you real quick. I'll have to zoom in on so you can get, it looks like is when Sebastian was having sex with Marla, but of course this is more like the Tyler instead of the Sebastian, and it is very cartoony, but again it matches the emotions that Palahniuk's trying to get across. So that was the scene. You can see them just having sex and really just gives a good visual element to it. The next one was the one where I said that you might miss the cigarette burns, which Tyler talked about in the film. And it's very blatant right here because he said the dog, Mr. Palahniuk, but Chuck wrote himself into the comic. So that's another way of breaking the fourth wall, just like Tyler talking to the audience in the film. And so you can see that there through figure 6. And that's very realistic compared to the cartoony style that you just saw in the previous one. This is what Palahniuk refers to as our meta thing. When questioned about who Tyler calls and informs he's back, Palahniuk confessed Tyler was in fact talking to him, Palahniuk, because he has the ability to write himself into this new medium. By acknowledging the creator, Palahniuk and Stewart are breaking the fourth wall, which gets broken quite often through Fight Club 2. So much, in fact, that they break back to the original novel. Don't worry, Tyler says, the dog is all right. Much like the signature David Fincher left on his film in breaking the fourth wall with acknowledging the changeovers, splices, and allowing the film to burn, Palahniuk wanted to mimic Fincher's film tricks into this new medium. And this is where I'll show you a few more pictures that shows how they broke the fourth wall, which is so visually astounding, and Cameron Stewart did such an amazing job. Total genius here. So Stewart was able to break the comic fourth wall with photorealistic rose petals and pills. So let me zoom in on those so you can kind of get a good look at this. And this is in the first issue, by the way. So there are the rose petals, and it's Marla throwing them. And then there are the pills that overshadow her. Like that's the main thing. And so I thought he did a completely amazing job making it cartoony, realistic, breaking the fourth wall. And as well as anything that he could occlude text over people's faces, like the pills and the flowers being over everything. So it's not so much about the text or all those little details in the picture as it is even, putting another layer over that. According to Palahniuk, studies on things that are occluded are more engaging because people will then try to complete the images in their minds longer than if it's readily completed. So all those things that the pills and the petals and other things are covering, that's where it'll engage the reader more, which led to those kind of stylistic choices. In addition to the stylistic choices between Stewart and Palahniuk, there are certain aspects which can be altered within the comic compared to the film. The collaborators were discussing Sebastian's healing ability in regard to Stewart's issues in conveying emotion for Sebastian in this medium with the many pummelings Sebastian sustains. The film was set as realistic as could be, where in the medium of comics, much like the meta things Palahniuk has grown fond of using, they were allowed to make a whole new set of rules to play with. And so this is where you see the shift from novel to film to comic. There are a different set of rules that you can play with and alter. That's a great thing about the change of mediums. So in this, in addition to quicker health, like with Tyler healing faster, Sebastian healing faster, having Marla attend progeria meeting, it's probably said completely wrong, worked better within this cartoony style than it would have in a film or a novel. In a novel, many could have understood the metaphor of Marla feeling prematurely matured, but would have missed the incredibly detailed and connecting visual that Stewart painted of children in an old person's body holding their favorite childhood toy with death lurking around the corner. In the film, many could have seen her with the aged children and heard the metaphor, but the children may have appeared to look fake, which is assumingly not what Palahniuk would want. Chosen the style of the comic, the medium as a whole plays the much needed role of having the happy medium between dense and exaggerated. Just like those two images I showed you, Palahniuk looks very realistic in that, but then the sex scene looks overly exaggerated, and you can play with that a lot more, I think, than you can in film. With that said, I think a good film at kind of doing both was the new Harry Potter one, the whatever monsters and where to find them, or beasts and where to find them, whatever it was called. I don't know why I can never remember the beginning. Love that movie. Something like that, but just, again, that's a whole nother stylistic choice. You have to really, really, really get right. Another specific strength about this particular medium is that the format is different from that of a novel or a movie. Palahniuk stated that the novel was chompy, whereas the comic format typically calls for a reveal with every page turn, which required more graceful visual transitions. MacLeod also describes how comics occupy different space than film. So each frame of a film is projected on the exact same space, whereas a comic must occupy a different space. So for MacLeod, space does for comics what time does for film. Another method given to comic book illustrators is of having varying degrees of appearance which differ from that of real life. This topic was touched on figure 5, which was the sex one that I showed you. MacLeod explains meaning as fluid and variable. So Stewart used this ability to not only explain with text how Sebastian was feeling, but to actually show how he was feeling. And in this, it's my figure 9. Oh my god. I accidentally zoomed in to 400. That was a place I don't think I ever want to go to again. So here is the text paired with the visual. So it says, look at him. He calls himself Sebastian these days. 10 years ago, he was destined to be another Alexander the Great. a new Genghis Khan, but Sebastian, ... And so that provides, you know, a couple different visual elements with the text that kind of balances quite perfectly. And it's, you know, like talking about somebody as if you're there, but without being there. Tyler's kind of seen as like the god of the comics. You know, he's the one talking over everyone and telling the story. So it's not until the second panel that Sebastian's feelings are stated in text, which aren't even stated by him, but Tyler, and he says he calls himself happy. However, in the preceding panel, Sebastian looks anything but happy. And so you can do that in film, it's just a little trickier. And so this is all done in just one little panel, and readers can look at it as long as they want, glaze over it fast. And I learned in reading comics that you could look at a panel for so long or read multiple times and see something you didn't see before, but what's interesting is it's just right there. You know, it's like the freeze frame, whereas the film, it's constantly moving, so it's, I think, easier to miss something, but in the comic, it's all up to you. It's just there. So in the use of having pictures is how the reader receives what Sebastian is feeling, whereas the text is about how the reader perceives how Sebastian is feeling. And considering these feelings are in opposition of one another, the reader can then infer that Sebastian is lying to himself about being happy. In comparing this method with the original novel, there is so much more lost from the text without these illustrations. So this I just put, Tyler asked, imagine the rest of your life with your bag flapping empty. And so that was just that quote, and it says, the commissioner said, no. And don't. Stop. Please. Oh, God, help me. Help, no. That was from the novel. But then the exaggerated emotions shown in the film and conveyed in the comic are completely dependent upon the reader in the novel. If the reader doesn't give the commissioner terror, then he doesn't have it. Whereas figure 10, which I'll show you here in a second, depicts Sebastian in a similarly saddened state, figure 9, but with the turn of a page in the succeeding panel, not only covers the entire page in one panel with a second one overlapping it in the bottom right corner, but it bleeds out of the panel, giving the reader the ability to see how Sebastian's alter ego is overwhelmingly and immensely aggravated with what Sebastian regards as important to life. So you'll see a little of the fourth wall breaking here again with the pills overshadowing the pages. But here's Sebastian pretending to be happy, and then there are the pills all over the place, which are what is actually making him happy. And then here is how Tyler perceives Sebastian's quote-unquote happiness. And you've got the video games, the food, the table, remember the whole IKEA thing, the therapy and all of that, the phone, everything that considered a life by Sebastian. And it just makes Tyler crazy. Like, he can't believe this is what makes him happy. While Fight Club 2 is quite a change from the original novel, its medium jumped before and not only survived but flourished. So it went from the novel to the film and now the comic, which I think are all successes. Palahniuk seems to quite enjoy the new liberties afforded to him while working in this medium, and it takes the story to a whole new level. Fight Club was made to break the fourth wall, and this medium allows for so many different ways to do so. Cameron and Palahniuk make a great team and do really well by letting each other be the masters of their own domains. So the works that I used to write this conference paper were Brian Bishop used the author Chuck Palahniuk tells us why it's time to reopen Fight Club through The Verge. Tracy Brown, exclusive Fight Club 2 pages. Tyler Durden's been around for longer than we thought. Fight Club the film. Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics and the Invisible Art. Really good if you don't know much about comics. Then I used Fight Club novel, Chuck Palahniuk and Cameron Stewart and Dave Stewart and the Fight Club 1 volume. Laura Snedden. Fight Club 2, Cameron Stewart discusses drawing the comic book sequel to Chuck Palahniuk's iconic book through The Independent. It was the Independent Digital News and Media. Steve Sunu, S-U-N-U. Check out Fight Club 2 art from Cameron Stewart and Kabook creator David Mack. That was in hitfix.com. And then Brian Truitt, Chuck Palahniuk reconceives his Fight Club in USA Today. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to throw it out there. That was my first master's paper. Sorry if it's horrible. I got an A though, I think. But I love Fight Club. Any more info you guys have, throw it up there. Articles. The more information I have, the better.